Welcome to the Beyond Body podcast with your hosts, Mia and Holly. Join us for a sometimes fortnightly podcast
where we explore all things mental health, being a messy human, and how to get the most out of this one precious life.
And all the ridiculous stories in between. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Beyond Body podcast. We are so happy to have you with us. And today is an episode where we've asked you for a little bit of your experience. So if you submitted something, you might hear yourself in today's episode. Hol, lovely to be with you again. Tell me what's been going on. We haven't done a highlight, low light question in a while. So maybe if we'll go back there, highlight, low light for you recently.
So good to be back as always, Mel, to be sitting down on a morning and chatting with you. This is, I feel like, podcast day, my favorite day of the week. It's so nice to sit down and talk about some of these things. But highlight, low light for me at the moment, I was just saying to you before we started recording, I've just started like the most normal week where I don't have all these like extra things on and I just have time to have friends over for dinner and like getting out into the surf. And I was just saying there's all these calves that have been birthed on the property that I live on, which
birthing season is upon us.
Birthing season is upon us. I've got a couple of friends that are about to also step into that birthing season.
It's that period of life.
So I'm feeling really good. On the weekend, I had which I think is, you would totally relate to this. Like when you live in a tourist town, you don't really feel like a tourist, but I was playing tourist. I had a staycation literally 500 meters from my house at this like resort for a couple of nights. That was like Western themed, as like an early birthday thing. And it was so great. I had the best time.
What was the retreat space? Like, what is it? It's
this place called the Sun Ranch, and it's just like really, really kind of new, really cool architecture, real Western theme. So like, there's cowboy hats in all the rooms. Like everything's like, it's very fun. We went on like a horseback ride one day, and then had like a long lunch on one of the days, and a bunch of friends came, and like everyone's in like cowboy get up. There was a lot of like yeehaws being thrown around. Yeah, we're playing like a lot of field games where you just play on the grass.
Yeah,
it's just the best. I had the best time. I just feel like so loved and just like, yeah, I'm feeling really content in this season of life.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, that's what should come after a tricky period.
Absolutely. So I am leaning into it. And it's so nice when you come out of a tricky period like me and Mil kind of both had for different reasons, a couple of real big months, to just be able to lean back and read the book and take time and not feel stressed is magical. That's kind of what life is all about. So really leaning into that. Yeah. And what's been happening for you, Mil?
So not a lot of low light, something, I guess this would go into low light category. I was swooped by plovers yesterday. I was coming back from my walk and I felt totally for magpie propaganda, thinking that magpies are the only swooping birds. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Plovers are birds which nest on the ground, which makes sense why they then go swooping after you. And then I put something up on TikTok about it and people were like, be careful, they have spikes on their wings. And I was like, hang on, what? Why are we demonizing magpies when we've got birds with spikes who are notoriously trying to like behead people out for their morning walk? I just want to put out a public apology to magpies everywhere for falling for this propaganda. Highlight, I think I'm in a similar position. Like there is still some stressful stuff going on, but comparatively to the last couple of months, just happy to be in a season where every area of my life isn't stressful. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. And I don't think it's realistic to feel like you're flowing in every season of life all the time.
No, that should not be the goal.
Absolutely not the goal.
No, that is a rigged game. Don't play that game. And just work. Like I said to you, you can see I'm in a bit of a different setup today. I'm midway through recording and creating this course for the people. There's this amazing course that I put together years ago, which I'm refining and making an evergreen option, which means you can work through it at your own pace and you've got sort of, 6 weeks to 12 months to move through it. And so just finally getting to pour a bit of my love and energy into that has been great because, as you know, I have these long-term projects. And then when I finally get to do them, it's like, oh my God, this is so satisfying. Kind of like the retreat. That was a dream for a long time. This is sort of synonymous. Being able to get things to people that are a bit more accessible and affordable from a skill-based perspective.
Amazing.
Yeah. So today, as I said, you might have some things that you've sent us featured in today's episode because, as usual, you send across great stuff. And today is an absolute example of that. We were saying these were some really great prompts you sent to us. Talking about the moment you realized you needed help. And it doesn't have to be the moment you reached out for help, that could be it. But it could just be those early glimmers of something's going on here, something's wrong, something is not congruent with maybe my value system or how I want to show up in the world or how I
Mm.
really want to treat myself. And we're going to get to the ones sent through because they are fabulous, but we are going to start with our lived experience because that's part of what we're here for is to connect through our lived experience. So, Hol, when you were reflecting on this, is it a moment for you, a series of moments? What came to the surface for you?
See, mine wasn't necessarily a specific moment, but a season of life that really dawned with this gradual acknowledgement that something huge needed to change.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I was saying to Mill before we jumped on, some of the submissions that have come in are so awesome and
Mm,
so much more. They have so much more insight than I had at the time where I was figuring out I really needed help. I
yes.
think, and I was coming into realization, I was really coming from this place of physical exhaustion and external overwhelm, that kind of place, as opposed to having cognitive insight. Like I had no ability to identify and separate that there may have been two voices in my mind. Like I was
Yes.
not even close to being there. I was just kind of lost in the world of behaviors and being like, this fucking sucks. Get me
Yeah.
out of here. Like that was what it was. So that season of life for me, for a bit of context, I had graduated from uni for the first couple of degrees I did, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, I'll continue on the academic path, and I went into my honors. And I was in this world where I felt like I was drowning, and I had to put in so much more work than anyone else just to stay
Hmm.
afloat. And I had also made this decision to progress in this career path that I didn't want.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what else I did want. And this like seemed like that, well, that'll sound really good from like an outside perspective. So
Yeah.
that was a really, really stressful time of my life. Like for me to feel like I could keep up with the study, my life was scheduled like minute to minute in terms of like enough time to study, enough time to exercise, enough time to see my boyfriend, enough time to like work, etc. And it was a bit of a ticking time bomb situation. Like I remember multiple times a week, I just have a breakdown being like, it's just too much. Like I can't handle it. So you can imagine like how many doubtful, low self-worth
Yeah.
ideas and beliefs were really coming up. Like I feel like I had such this core belief for such a long time that was also surfacing at the time, like I'm not smart enough. And that
Mm.
was just so much going on at that time. And I went on a camping trip with my partner at the time. I think maybe I told this story on the pod years ago, but I was so lost in behaviors
Yes.
and I was hiding it from the world and thought I had been doing a pretty good job for years. Like, we're talking years. And there
Mhm.
came a point where I was obviously just not present. I just couldn't engage. And he said to me, he was like, I know something's going on and I don't know what it is, but I feel like we're at the max level of which we can connect because you're not letting me in.
Yeah, I do remember you saying this.
Yeah. And so that was a huge thing for me to really grapple with and just kind of come to terms with what does that mean? Because, you know, I was very much living on this surface layer of life where I just wanted to make it look good. I don't know even who for like
Yeah.
people whom I didn't know. Like
Yeah.
that's really what I was doing. And there came a day, I know I was at uni and I had this big oral seminar that I'd worked on for months and I felt really good going into it. And then at the end of it, I was just like hit with all these questions that I didn't feel prepared to answer and I
Mhm.
just crumbled. I remember that afternoon, my sister was at the same uni at that time. And I just broke down to her and I was like, I actually just cannot do this. Like, my life needs to change. So it was one of those moments where it was I'm going to blow up my life. One of those moments. And I think we often come back to the idea of so often like deconstruction is necessary for reconstruction.
Yeah.
And this was one of those, like, I didn't know what it was going to look like yet, but I knew that my behaviors were a disaster and I was in these painful swings of really restrictive, but also really rigid, just in terms of my scheduling and everything that came into that. And then I would just fly the other way and go into binge purge behaviors
Yes.
which were the ones that I more so thought were like more chaotic because I didn't even
They're
know.
the ones we want to fix.
Yeah, I didn't even know what the word restriction was. I was like, what do you mean? Like my healthy eating? Like, what
Yeah.
do you mean? Like that was literally my understanding of it. Like it was like so naive given what I know now.
Yeah.
Um, So that was a time where it's like I dropped out. The next day I called my mum and was like, I need help. I have a problem with food. I'm sure I didn't disclose all
Mm,
of the information at that point, but it
mm,
was like that initial sort of phone call then opened me up to the process of what's therapy going to look like.
yeah.
And it's so interesting reflecting on it now because, obviously when anyone kind of comes to the realization of that moment and then leans into it, like you would think it would feel like super daunting and super scary. And for me, like, yeah, it felt scary, but there was also this deep feeling of relief because it
Oh,
was
yeah.
kind of like, oh my God, okay, I don't have to like keep doing that crazy thing in terms of both the behaviors and the life that I was trying to craft. That was like, I was holding that shit together with sticky tape. Like it
Yeah.
was not gonna work. Yeah, it felt really scary, but I was in the headspace of like, I need to get rid of these behaviors. They suck. I had no idea that I was going to be removing maladaptive behaviors that were actually serving a purpose, that were
Yeah.
like, they were the way in which I'd learned to cope with the world. And then I'd have to figure out how to cope with the world in a more healthy way. So, like, I had no clue what I was going into. And honestly, if I think I did, if I did have that awareness, I probably would have been more scared than I was.
Absolutely. I so resonate with the relief thing as well because the anticipation of something is always worse than the
Yes,
actual thing. But I think you have to have
always.
some pretty cataclysmic examples of that in your life to learn that and to really reckon with that.
Mm,
Definitely talking about the fact I had a problem was one of those big pieces of evidence of like the anticipation of the thing you run over in your mind 1,000 times and feel the anxiety of 1,000 times. If you just do it once, you only have to feel that anxiety once. And actually, you might be surprised by how much relief is mixed in there as well. And like it's like releasing a pressure valve.
exactly. And that's exactly what it felt like. Like something was going to give, and it was either like, obviously, like my physical health was really struggling. I was getting sick all the time. Like my relationships were in the bin. Like everything was falling apart. And it's so ironic because I was trying to like put my life together in this attempt of moving forwards. And actually, I was pushing myself into this hole of like, I was just so stuck. And I was so, through doing that, I became further and further away from myself.
Yes. What were you telling yourself, just on the flip side of kind of
Mm,
the question? Because the moment we realize would imply that previously we are not realizing, we're not acknowledging, we're in some maybe form of denial, but we're doing behaviors that you can't really ignore. It's so interesting,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's
Like
so
we're doing
interesting.
physical behaviors, especially because, the binging purging part of the behavioral profile was a feature for both of us. And that in particular is such an overt series of behaviors. It takes a while. Like it's a whole process, right? It's getting the food, it's eating the food, it's the behavior that takes place, and then there's sitting in the aftermath. So, what do you think you were telling yourself prior to moments of realization and like putting the pieces
Mm,
together? How did you kind of justify or
yeah.
avoid the reality?
Yeah, sweeping under the rug predominantly is what I was
Yes.
doing there. I think there was two different experiences for me. There was the experience of I know there's something wrong here, and then the moment that I knew I needed help to fix the thing that was wrong.
Yes.
Like they were very different for me, like years apart,
Yeah.
like years and years apart. Because, and I think even the fact that, I had been engaging in these behaviors secretly for years, like
Mhm.
you're not engaging in something secretly unless you feel like for some reason it's not going to be understood or received well from an external party, right? So
Yes.
even that level of secrecy, there's this awareness of like, whoa, that's like not the status quo. Like I don't think I should be doing that. And then
Mhm.
I think in that the reason for secrecy, it's like, well, obviously there's shame, but also maybe there's a fear of that thing being taken away. And so much of this is in retrospect that I had the understanding of it. And, I think there had absolutely, because I had my behavioral profile was such a pendulum swing,
Yeah.
my attempt to try to like fix it myself and get myself out of these ruts, little did I know I was just still in the rut. It was just appearing differently. Like I just swing the other side to like the restriction. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is me trying to fix the situation. It's like, no, no, no. This is the problem. This is the problem.
Isn't that still so satisfying with clients when you finally
Yeah.
get them to see the pendulum swing,
Oh,
where
I
they're
love it. Oh, I
isolating
love it.
to, you know what I mean? Like they're isolating, restriction is good,
Mm,
or binging and purging is bad. And
mhm.
so there's bad and there's good. And then you're like, oh no, we got to bring them together. They're neither good nor
Absolutely.
bad. They're just logical. Like one is going to end up in the
Totally.
other, and then you're going to pull it back this way. And when you let go of that pendulum, physics wise, there's only one way it can go, and that's all the way around to the other side. And then they're like, you can kind of see more of the self-compassion and self under like awareness kick in, and therefore it becomes more 1 + 1 = 2 versus am I doing a good or bad thing?
Absolutely, because I think for a lot of people who struggle with the behavioral profile that I had, it's that you don't have an awareness of what the gray space between the pendulum looks like because your whole life has been lived in like the all or nothing, the black and white. So to feel like you're in the middle, it can feel like, well, the A, that doesn't exist, and if it did, it sounds really fucking boring. Like I don't have time for that. You know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a huge part of it. But yeah, it's so interesting the lack of awareness of like how damaging the restriction is, even just on its own, right?
Yes.
When you also have these other behaviors that you feel like, well, they are really not socially acceptable because they're not.
Yeah.
Restriction is socially acceptable. And
Yeah,
I
it
think,
is.
I had such a weak at that time anchor of self to realize that like just because something like might be socially acceptable of norm doesn't mean like it's kind or appropriate or the thing that's going to help me move forwards in my life. So yeah, it's so interesting reflecting on it. But I also think for me personally, like I had to go through these life experiences. I had to come to the realization that I needed help. This wasn't because I just couldn't do this on my own
Yeah.
in my own time.
Yeah.
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 It's the roundabout thing we talk about, right? Like sometimes
Yeah.
intersections of realization, but also time and then
Absolutely.
capacity. Like sometimes you just need the flotation device in this season and you might be aware, but like you're just not in a place where you can reach for that next thing. The boat hasn't arrived yet. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that my moments of realization were actually well before I actually got help, and that's probably
Yeah.
partially logistical. But it was when I moved to London, was in this great pink cloud honeymoon period when I first moved to London, was like, oh my God, I'm fixed, no behaviors. Like everything's wonderful, and I'm making all these new friends and got this great job, and I'm just having the time of my life. And then obviously it all comes back because we see that quite a lot. Like when clients come and they're like, I'm Mia, I'm cured. I'm not using any behaviors. My first question will always be, did you recently meet someone? Are you in love? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, no kidding. You're full of oxytocin and really happy chemicals. And that's wonderful. But it's just a seasonal thing in terms of eating disorder, sort of sitting on the sidelines, but it will come back when those things kind of find their level again. It was a similar kind of thing. I was in love with my life and it went away for a little while. But London is then where it absolutely spiraled, which makes sense. I didn't
Mm.
have all of my usual supports, all of my usual
Yeah.
routine. Was drinking a lot, was partying a lot. Don't get me wrong, it was a fantastic time. Best of times, worst of times kind of period. But once the colder seasons hit, I just spiraled, like was in the gym all the
Mm.
time, was incredibly out of control with food, was swinging in the same pendulum that you were just talking about, the restriction to the binging and purging, restricting to binging and purging. And I was doing some overtly disordered stuff even outside of my behaviors
Mm.
out on eating disorder forums, not contributing to them, but reading all kinds of tips and tricks. These spaces, thankfully, don't exist in that form anymore. Of course, there's always going to be pro eating disorder spaces, but these ones don't exist. I'm still not going to mention them. And I would go so far as to convince myself the things I would tell myself to justify and be in denial. I would convince myself everyone did this stuff. Everyone on the
Mm.
planet did this kind of behavior, which is kind of true in terms of we see a lot of disordered diet culture stuff everywhere. But I'm talking about the really overt, absolutely undeniably disordered behaviors. I believed everyone was doing them and convinced myself of that. So it's really weird because in that, there is an awareness, right? Like the denial is
Mm.
gone because you're naming it, but then my brain had to do
Yes.
another trick, which is, yeah, this isn't healthy and it's not good, but everybody's doing it.
Totally. And like, how's like the human mind gaslight on yourself? Oh,
Real.
yeah.
Like I think
And
back on
you would
some
have
of that
believed
stuff.
that too. You would have believed that to your core. And I
My
find,
core.
like that is fundamental gospel. This is how I'm living my life because of this thing that I don't know, I heard this information and it supported the eating disorder, so we've locked it in.
Yes.
It's interesting, like when I'll have like a client come to me and they'll say something that feels that it is absolutely true to them, and it's the
Mhm.
eating disorder's attempt of justifying its existence, which would be something like no one eats snacks. I'd be like,
Yeah. Hi.
oh, okay.
Hi.
Let's just pull that apart a little bit. Like no one eats snacks. It's like, who are you around? Yourself?
You're talking to someone who eats snacks. Hi, on the
I
other
was like,
side of the
I'm literally
screen.
eating a snack in the session. This This is absolutely not a meal.
Exactly. So there was a lot of duality of growing awareness, but also
Mm,
simultaneously strong levels of denial.
yeah.
Then my mum came to visit. My birthday is December 14th. And so she took me to New York for my birthday, which was fabulous.
Yeah.
And
Don't
also
believe
not
it.
fabulous because my hair had started to fall out in the
Ah.
weeks before she arrived. And so then I had this, I felt like this squeezing sensation of like, mum's coming.
Mm,
This is starting to show up in a way that she's going to notice. Of course, she's going to notice it. She hasn't seen me for like 8 or 9 months, right?
yeah.
She's going to see, she's going to say something because she had attempted to say things in previous seasons where I would be staying with her or we lived together and she would find things which indicated something was wrong and she would call me and I would just shut it down.
Mm,
And when
mm,
I'm like that, I don't blame anyone for not pushing back because I will just very clearly be like, we are not discussing this. And, this is the end of this conversation.
yeah.
But I knew that she would see that there was something really wrong. Also, I had started to develop rosacea. So I had really painful red spots and blushing on my face, which was not like me. I always had really clear skin. I knew she was going to know something was seriously wrong, even if she didn't know what it was. And
Mm,
I didn't know that I had a strong enough armor to not have it all come out. So I was so excited to see her and so relieved to see her, but she also represented this impending doom of
mm,
this whole thing I've constructed around myself that I need so desperately, this armor, it's just going to be ripped away from me.
mm.
So I think that was the first big moment of there is something really wrong here and I need help. But because I was still overseas, I didn't really have the opportunity to follow through on that. And I probably still wasn't ready. I think that was the beginning of knowing I was on the
Mm,
roundabout and staring at it because it wasn't
sure.
probably until, yeah, like 18 months later that I got help.
Yeah.
And as I've spoken about before, my big tipping point was when I made an attempt on my life. And that's what prompted me to get on the phone and be like, I need help and I need it today. And you are going to help me. Basically, I didn't ask. I was like, you are going to help me, and this is how.
Yeah. Yeah. So just on that, when she came and visited,
Yeah.
did she notice something? Like, what was the trip kind of like? What was the energy there?
Oh, yeah. So it took her a couple of days, but she noticed that my hair, because obviously I was very self-conscious of it as I was of my entire appearance. So I would be
Of
fussing with my hair so
course.
much. And
Of
before we'd go
course.
out for lunch or for dinner or whatever, it would be such a fixation, which she hadn't seen before. And she approached it really gently. And I obviously could just blame it on things like it's the weather, it's the hard water here
The
in London.
water.
It's,
Yeah.
and that makes sense with like skin. I have really sensitive skin. And so she would sort of echo and mirror that back to me. So I was like, great, that's working. But she was the first person in my life in months where she knew me so well. All these new people in my life knew this version of me that I was in London, where I could basically like explain anything the way that I wanted to. Nobody, could go, hang on a minute, that's not right or that's not true. Um, so I think that's why it was an awakening for me is that I couldn't outrun myself. You know what I mean? Like I had to say things to
Mm,
her and lie to her
yeah.
because she knew me so intimately and I knew I had to sell it. With other people, I didn't because how would they know? But with mum, I knew I had to sell it. So I was like, I'm actively being dishonest here.
Yes. And isn't it so sad? Like, it's just such a deep sadness when you realize that you're being dishonest with the people who are closest to you, who are the
Mhm.
people who would support you no matter where you're at, no matter
Yeah.
what's going on. I think that was a big thing for me as well of realizing like I could have had help so much sooner if I could just get over my own barriers of,
Yes.
whether it's like the shame or, absolutely, I think for maybe you also relate to this as well, like, having like a single parent for quite a while, being like, well, I don't want to like put this on you because you're
Yeah.
already like carrying the world. Yeah, it's so interesting because then it like just starts this, unfortunately, this you develop this really strong skill of masking way too well.
Oh, and in every setting you have to. Food is intrinsic to everything, right? It's in your work
Mm,
environments, it's in your friendships, it's in dating and relationships, it's with your family. You become so skilled at it
mm,
until you run out of road. And
mm.
not sustainable anymore, especially if you're not
Mm,
fueling yourself enough. Like
yeah,
those cracks are going to start to show because you don't even
totally.
have the mental capacity to keep
Totally.
on top of everything.
And that's when it can get so confusing for people because I think that you can forget that you're even wearing a mask. And you're like, my life's falling apart. It's like that was never your life to start with.
Completely, absolutely. And
Um, so I'll take it away. So we've got some of these great responses from the people. So the first one that someone has sent in is when my internal voice started praising my efforts. What do you think here, Mel?
such a good one because it's such an important thing we're doing with people, helping them delineate there is an external eating
Mm,
disorder, there is a whole healthy self, and then there's like this patch of vulnerability that that eating disorder latches onto and turns into its own belief system, its own voice, its own value system. You are not that eating disorder, you're the vulnerable patch, right? And we're
mm,
healing the vulnerable patch and we're getting rid of the external eating disorder, which is why we don't demonize any of this stuff, right? So I think this is a great demonstration of how that starts to form when we start to hear something that previously wouldn't have shown up or would have had a different viewpoint or would have been an alarm is suddenly like an applause, right? Something that would have been a warning, go back, is now a well done, keep coming this way.
mm,
And it's also something, if you didn't clock it until you looked back, that's totally normal too. We
mm,
don't intentionally go into eating disorders, so we're not paying attention to our cognitions in the way that we are as we go through recovery, right? As I say to people often, you subconsciously repeated your way into an eating disorder. The way that things become ingrained is we repeat cognitions and we repeat the action, which kind of cements them. Now you're doing that in the opposite direction, but you're doing it intentionally now. You're doing it with focus. So when we look back and we go, oh, I can see it now. How did I not know? How did I not intervene? Because most of it was subconscious. It only starts to look obvious as you move away from it and get a contrast of like, oh my gosh, I don't talk to myself like that anymore. How could I have listened to that and thought that was okay and normal? It's totally understandable that you only become aware as you look back. But this is definitely a big moment,
mm,
I think, in terms of realizing
mm.
it's got its hooks into us when it's our cognitions start to shift.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super insightful. And I think this capacity to understand the cognitive dissonance is a real cornerstone of everyone's recovery sooner or later when you realize, oh, I'm actually witnessing what's going on in my mind. I'm not in it. I'm
Yes.
not like lost in it. So I feel like this one was super, super insightful. This next one said, when my friends stopped inviting me to anything because I always said no. I feel like this one, I totally understand the deep sadness that can come with this when you realize that your eating disorder is taking away a lot more from your life than maybe just, these slow experiences of, I get to participate in life and it's a choice. But when you actually don't get invited anymore, like that's taking away connection and relationship.
And it's also taking away evidence of how you are valuable in ways that
Yes.
your eating disorder doesn't agree with, right? And it can then contribute to your eating disorder's beliefs and biases of,
Absolutely.
right? People don't care about
Of
me.
course, I
People
wasn't
don't love.
invited.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And so I
Mm.
need this thing. This thing is my company. It's my purpose. It's my distraction. Like I need it because look, people don't care about me anymore and they don't love me. And then it can also twist the reasons why, right? Like, oh, it's because of maybe, some of the beliefs about how we look or what people
Mm.
value about us. Because I had such a belief that people really valued what I looked like, and my friends did not value what I looked like at all, funnily
Totally.
enough. But I would have used and did use things like this to bolster not just the role my eating disorder played, but my desperate need for it. Well, okay, if everyone's going to leave,
Yeah,
I definitely need this thing. And it's like, it's why they left. So if we get rid of the eating
totally.
disorder, we'll probably have more people in our lives. This one I find really heartbreaking and also befuddling because it shows how irrational the eating disorder is in what it's trying to do for you versus what it executes.
Mm.
Very often, what we're looking for in our eating disorder is permission to belong, permission to connect, permission to be ourselves, permission to have friendships or relationships. And it says that the way you can do that is through these behaviors or through your body and how it presents. But then the mechanisms you have to use to get to this body that you think is going to give you connection isolates you so you don't connect to people and then you need the eating
Mm,
disorder because you don't have people anymore. You know what I mean? Like it's just
absolutely.
such a parallel to like an abusive relationship where it's
Yes.
like, I need you for validation, but you invalidate me and make me feel worthless. So now I feel worthless. I need you. Like it's such a trap.
Exactly. And on top of that as well, it also is then tainting someone's ability to be able to show up authentically because you don't have enough opportunities and life experiences to really understand what would that look and feel like, right?
Yeah.
And I've spoken to so many clients who feel like, they push themselves to like go to something social and they don't usually, but then they were kind of in their shell and then they felt like they shouldn't have gone. It's like, well, I think a lot of time you have to stay in the arena to
Yes.
realize like, okay, well, yeah, I showed up, but also was I showing up with my eating disorder who was like talking to me in my ear, like, you're not good enough to be here, like you shouldn't have worn this, whatever it may be. And of course that's gonna dull your light a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So this is a really hard one because people also need to be having life experiences out in the world to then be that motivation. Like it's the thing that's going to propel the motivation to be like, oh, I want more of this. Like
Yeah.
this is the good thing. So it is a really tricky one.
And I think it's where we can be so important, just to toot our own horn. We're very different people. Just want to demonstrate that. But where I think that we as coaches in the treatment picture are really important is I think when people envision what we're doing with our clients, it's goals around food, movement, body image, and that's all absolutely correct. But we're also setting very human goals because we're
Yeah.
whole people and you need to heal your relationships, how you approach relationships, how you have boundaries, how you help seek. All these things that we touch on are also things we're doing in coaching work because
Yeah.
the food and the movement in the body are where the symptoms show up, but the causes are more in these human things that need to be healed. And particularly how we relate to other people is a really, really important one. And being in the arena, as you say. So setting goals with people where we're just getting them out in their lives again and able to build up evidence that they can navigate that in a different way to how they did before.
Mm.
They're good
Mm.
stuff to have permission to show up there.
And it's such a journey on its own, the whole social piece of being able to figure out how you show up in interpersonal relationships socially in the world through your healing.
Yes.
Um, and I think a big aspect of that that people have to come face to face with is a lot of the rejection sensitivity, which a
Hmm.
lot of people with eating disorders, of course, struggle with. But, we talk a lot about the idea of failure, and a part of that is rejection sensitivity in the workshops, in the retreats. And a big part of that is also understanding that like we're actually all going to get rejected sometimes, and you just got to actually keep trying, whether that's in a social setting where it might be like, oh, those people just kind of weren't really my vibe. That's
Yeah.
okay. To be
Yeah.
like, you just keep looking and don't settle. What that helps you develop is that emotional resilience, and you don't get resilience if you don't go through experiences of adversity, and if you're not putting yourself out there, you're not going to have even the potential to have an experience of adversity that can then get you that resilience that you need to do the next thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
we're always resilience, and just particularly like emotional resilience, it's a skill.
Yeah.
Like it happens over time. It's not something that anyone's going to develop if they're not giving themselves the opportunity to do that. Like take emotional risks. Ask the random girl at a cafe, do you want to have a coffee with me? Like
Yeah.
whatever it might be, like send the manuscript, like whatever it might be. Being able to do these things is what reminds us that it's actually us that is in the driver's seat of our lives, and we get to determine the opportunities that come to us because we can create them. We don't have to wait for things just to happen to us.
Yeah.
Which I think this conversation then really links with just this whole idea in recovery of autonomy. Like you need to be the one, you need to take back your power and realize that you have to be the one in the driver's seat, which actually links to fantastic accidental segue, Holly, but links to one of the other prompts that someone sent in that says, when I realized I couldn't stop and that I didn't have power over my eating disorder behaviors. So this is that huge piece of awareness around the power dynamic shift.
Hmm.
And I think realizing that you are the one, like this is your one precious life,
Hmm.
only yours. It's no one else's. And you don't want to just be here for the ride, right? And having no say over the direction.
Yes.
And that's what happens when someone has an eating disorder. You can really feel like, fuck, I've just had to strap in and I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. When I read this, literally flashed back to the moment I
Oh.
really, really accepted this. I was living in an apartment in Bellevue Hill with a housemate, and I had just used a behavior, and all the usual sort of regret and shame, etc., settled. But what I kept saying to myself was, the last time this happened, you promised you wouldn't do it again. You
Mm,
swore you wouldn't do it again. So why did we do this again? You know
mm,
that you have the ability to execute what you want to execute, and you have willpower. And I've always, been like, this is the thing I'm working towards, and so it's going to happen. And this was one of the first times I was like, I
mm,
can't make this happen. I have every intention of not doing this. And I keep finding myself in this pattern. It was almost like a cycle of X number of days and it would happen again, X number of days and it would happen again. And I couldn't get further than a week. Like 1 week was it. And then it was just quote unquote inevitable. And I remember that trapped feeling of, if I don't know how to change this and I can't stop myself from doing it, like, what is the answer here? How do I get out of it? Because I think this is where we can see such a need for really effective awareness and widespread awareness about eating disorders. Because
mm,
as much as I knew on a level that this was eating disorder adjacent, I
mm,
didn't know clearly what it was. I was still gaslighting myself into thinking maybe it was something else, or
mm.
it wasn't as bad as what I knew eating disorders to be, because at that time it was just the stereotype, and it was just stereotypical behaviors represented, stereotypical physical form of what an eating disorder looked like, which was just that emaciated appearance. And so, yeah, I didn't understand that this is what made it so serious, that I could not
Yes.
stop, that I was just driven entirely by compulsion.
Mm. And isn't it that moment of, I think that moment for a lot of people can really feel quite scary.
Mm.
That moment you're like, I'm in danger.
Hmm.
It's like I don't feel safe. You know, if you've had that experience at any point in life, it's sort of this like this deep, I think like almost it's like such a somatic feeling of like, this is no longer safe. I'm in danger.
Kind of feels like what I would imagine it would feel like. Have you ever seen those stories about those chronic sleepwalkers who
Mm.
like get out of bed and get in their car,
I've seen some videos.
drive, or like walk on train tracks and stuff, and they're dead. They're
Wow.
completely out of it. That's kind of what it felt like. Like,
Mm,
because so much of the eating disorder experience is that sense of being hijacked, of dissociating, of not being in control, of you walking into the supermarket and then engaging in these behaviors and then kind of coming to and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that again. But feeling like
mm.
every time you might wake up and a train was about to hit you, when is this compulsive thing going to also intersect with something really irreversible, It was, yeah, that, as you say, that frightening feeling of, if I'm out of control and I keep doing this, then it's got to run out of road at some point.
Yeah, and I think, you know, sometimes some of these moments I think are going to be really stark and make a big impact for someone quite quickly, and some of them are going to be a lot more subtle, and you're going to need to have those experiences multiple times. I think a lot of the time in recovery, someone has to experience something or hear something or go through something for that lesson to start to make sense and for it to
Yes.
really stick as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
The next one is one that we touched on before that someone said, when I started looking up eating disorder information online. It
Mhm.
wasn't until I read this that I had this awareness of a memory that it's hard for me to kind of even place it in the timeline of exactly where it was, but I was like home alone, living in a share house. I think it might have been like a Friday or Saturday night. And on like the TV in like the living room, I started watching some like eating disorder documentary. But
Mm.
then I was like really looking at the door, being like, is anyone gonna
Mm.
see that like I'm watching this and then be like, why are you watching it? And then obviously like that default of fear came from, well, what if then they are able to like link something together of like something that they may or may not have seen, but I still wasn't in this place of awareness of what was even going on, which is so interesting, the
Yeah.
psychology behind it.
Yes, I see this from two different angles. It reminds me of what I was talking about before, which is looking up objectively pro eating disorder
Mm,
information,
yeah.
but then looking up things like what's wrong with me.
Mm. Yeah,
And
yeah. Is
literally,
this normal?
Yeah. I remember being 19. This was like my depression and eating disorder developing alongside each other, but I was more conscious of my very rapid sort of decline in mood. And I remember sitting at work and doing like the do I have depression quizzes, just doing one after the other, just hoping to get a different response. And then very quickly like realizing, oh no, these are all saying the same thing. And it's why having even those entry point resources are so important. We've talked about this before
Yeah.
when we've talked about social media. Of course, there's all kinds of pitfalls and all kinds of dangerous elements to eating disorders and how they're represented in even recovery spaces. We've covered
Mm.
that ad nauseum. But I think this is where social media has played a very vital role as far as that entry point information and eating disorder literacy and recovery literacy, particularly through the lens of lived experience, with so many people generously sharing their different behavioral profiles and experiences for people to see themselves in and go, oh, hang on a minute, I do that. Or hang on a minute, I talk to myself like that. Or that's, something that I've been suppressing or in denial about, and this person's just out there talking about it and giving it language. I really can't ignore that. I think that always got to be a balancing act, but I certainly wouldn't want us to take a black and white approach of like it's all bad or all good, because there's that grey in the middle, which has
Absolutely.
such an important key stepping stone for people to get better.
Absolutely. And, I think it's an ongoing conversation as social media is so quickly, rapidly developing about how there is no like best way, I think, for someone to necessarily use it. It is also just so dependent on where you're at. But I can say, for that time, I was never the, I never had the kind of approach of I want to be sick.
Yeah.
I want to have an eating disorder. Even when I was in recovery, I was like, I don't want anyone to know about this, like
Yeah.
eat any part of it. So I think because that was my mentality, I always had a healthy relationship with recovery content, but it's such a slippery slope, and I think it's another part where you have to be so brutally honest with yourself of what's the intention here.
Completely.
Like, am I doing this to trigger myself? Because I'm gonna compare, no
Mhm.
matter what the means of comparison is.
Yes.
So it's a really risky place, but is also why I think for so many people it was so useful that years ago they came across the what Mia did next YouTube.
And here we still are. We can't get rid of her.
It lives on.
Yeah. Really resonated with this final one. When getting the compliments I wanted didn't feel like enough. Oh my gosh, this Teflon feeling of I'm finally getting the validation and affirmation, and people are finally saying what I've wanted them to say, and just feeling it briefly hit and then fly off, and needing more and more and more of that for it to feel like it was hitting until it
Mhm.
just wasn't at all.
Mm.
Was something that I think contributed to my growing awareness, where I was like,
Yeah.
there's no return on investment here. What is going on? What am I doing this
Mm.
for? And wouldn't it make more sense that I would reach this outcome I've wanted to reach and I'd just be able to stop, and I would be able to get sort of the affirmation I was looking for, which is
Mm.
obviously an unhealthy viewpoint anyway.
Mm.
And then I could stop, but that there was no stopping point. There was nothing sufficient enough to go, and we're done. We can stop
Yeah.
here, because obviously that's the dangerous mechanism of an eating disorder. There is no end point. There is no
Mm.
enough. There is no well done. Here we are, and this is where we
Mm.
stay. And you don't have to continue to do this to yourself.
Mm.
And yeah, just the disappointment and the frustration I felt when it was like, what was all this for? What am I doing this
Mhm.
for when I feel
Mm.
absolutely none of it?
I completely agree. I resonate with this one so much as well. Just that never ending desire to be enough. But the hard part of it, I think, is that, through the chasing, through the striving of that, you ignore the evidence that actually could be supportive of this idea that you are enough and you always have been enough.
Yeah.
It's also such a sign of the mind trying to override tangible facts, which is
Yes.
a really dangerous place to be. I say to clients all the time, don't ignore the evidence. The
Yeah.
evidence is literally there.
It just depends on which part of you is plugged into it because your eating disorder, as we've given a few examples here and the people have as well, it will
Mm,
twist things around and rewrite reality and history to turn it into evidence for itself. And if you allow it to do that, then it's just going to have a field day versus using some of these skills we can teach people to be like, create a bit of space, ask some questions, go looking, find the evidence, the
mm,
actual objective evidence, evidence you would only accept if you were sitting in a courtroom, not the twisted evidence which eating disorder can, as I've said, I
mm.
believed everyone had eating disorders. That felt as factual to me as the sky is blue. And because I never pushed back, I never realized how ludicrous it really sounded. So, yeah, just
Absolutely.
pushing back slightly, you'll see how quickly it all just falls apart like a house of cards.
Which just speaks to the necessity for self-inquiry, asking yourself some of those questions. Who's going to benefit? What part of me is going to benefit from this evidence being true?
Yes. And having people to bounce off and someone to mirror back to you the things that you're saying. Again, where we can be so useful is with that lived experience piece where people are trying to justify to themselves and to you and probably to other people why this behavior is okay or innocuous or not disordered. And we can sit there and say things like, if I, as your recovered coach, who you pay to help you navigate this process, if I told you that I do that, how would that sit with you? And they're like, I would not keep seeing you. Oh, there you go. So it's either disordered for both of us or neither of us. You pick.
We hope that this conversation has brought a little bit of insight to all the people that are listening. We also are so grateful for everyone that sends stuff in. It really just keeps the conversations really relatable and gives us such a useful entry point into understanding what's actually going on for everyone. So thank you for being here, and we will be back shortly with another episode. Thanks,
We will.
Mel.
People, see you soon.